The Painted Grave. John Drake shuddered as he stared at the picture. He had painted a masterpiece, but a masterpiece of horror. Dead white eyes it had, and the fangs of a jungle beast. And now it seemed almost alive as it returned his stare from the lighted canvas. It had been human once, and was portrayed standing next to a yawning grave from which a spade caked with damp earth projected. Few men possessed the courage to imagine such a thing, much less depict it on a canvas. But John Drake was a strange person, possessed of an artistic genius which lent life to his creations. He was obsessed with an urge to paint only nameless horrors. And in this picture, he had reached the climax of his career. It lived. One could almost smell the damp earth from the open grave. And as to that awful creature that stood there, what was it? Ghoul? Zombie? Drake himself wasn't sure. He looked again, and a wave of dizziness swept over him. He couldn't break away. That thing's glaring eyes seemed to grip him in a hypnotic spell. It took determination to turn his eyes away, but finally he did it. Whew! No doubt about it. He had done his work well. He had surpassed himself, had breathed weird life into the creation on the canvas. Now he had to get away from it, away from that sinister, yawning grave. With a weary shrug, he crossed the room to a mirror and stood regarding himself in the shadows. He saw his face, sensitive and careworn, and behind him the reflection of the awful picture he had painted. But what was making the room so dark? As though someone had pulled down all the blinds, shutting out all the moonlight. Suddenly, the mirror showed him something else, a shadow, weaving about close to the canvas. But how? How could the picture cast a moving shadow? Drake's scalp began to tingle. Now his ears sensed footsteps behind him, crossing the floor with a dull, insistent tread. It couldn't be. He could find out easily enough, simply by turning. Why couldn't he turn? What was holding him rooted to the floor in the grip of a nameless terror? He started to scream even before he saw the face, for the thing was standing there staring at him with glassy eyes, its fangs bared and drooling. Then, with an inhuman screech, it leaped. Drake fought it with all his strength. Sweat pouring off his face, his neck cord swelling, he struggled frenziedly against the claws that raked and tore. But it was too strong for him. Shrieking and struggling, he felt himself being dragged toward the canvas, toward a yawning, painted grave that was too realistic. The strange mystery of John Drake's disappearance was never solved. It created a sensation for a while, but it was at last forgotten. The police investigated, but finally they were forced to admit defeat, closing their files on the great painter. Quite a crowd attended the auctioning off of his canvases, and the highest price was paid for the great masterpiece he had completed just before he dropped from sight, never to be heard of again. It was a graveyard scene, amazingly lifelike in its every detail. There was nothing in the picture except for a filled grave, with the earth around it trampled as if a struggle had taken place.